Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Ixalan spoilers. So we have a ton to talk about today. We don't have too many new cards, but we have some interesting ones. We got the Planeswalker deck cards for both decks. We also got the promos officially spoiled, and we still got to work through the green cards and red cards from the big spoiler dump on Monday, which means this is going to be a long one, but if we get through it, we will be completely caught up heading into official spoilers all next week, the week after that. So let's get to it and start off with the new cards with the Planeswalkers decks. First off, we have a Dinosaur flavored Planeswalker deck featuring Hootali? Hulalti? I have no idea how to say that name, Dinosaur Knight, and it's a pretty fun idea. So it only is good in a dinosaur deck, putting counters on your dinosaurs, making your dinosaurs fight, and then eventually kind of overrunning your dinosaurs. But I think it'll be a really fun and popular casual type Planeswalker deck, and that's what the Planeswalker decks are for. Otherwise, we get Sunblessed Mount as our Planeswalker tutor, which comes in every deck. Not a bad one. A 4/4 for 5 is reasonable. You search up your Planeswalker, 6 mana, so you get to play it the next turn, and then Hualti's Spurring comes down as a great pump spell. It's actually very above the curve if you control your namesake Planeswalker. +4/+0 for just a single mana is actually a ton of damage. That is way above the curve. On the other hand, we don't really know that we'll have Hualti in the set proper, so if there's a push version of our Dinosaur Planeswalker in the set, there could be some conversation that you would actually play Hualti's Spurring in Standard. Otherwise, it's just a fun, casual Planeswalker deck card. And then Stone Quarry. Wizards loves putting these tap lands in the Planeswalker deck, so good way to fix the mana. Our other Planeswalker deck features Jace Ingenious Mind Mage. 6 mana, 5 loyalty, +1 draws you a card, +1 also untaps all your creatures, and then if you get all the way up to 9, you can negative and mind control up to 3 target creatures, which is a pretty good deal. So, of course, it's a lot of mana to see play in Standard. The only really great ability is the +1. Untapping your creatures is kind of middling. I guess it is a way to protect your stuff, but I think it just sits out, generates card advantage. I would be surprised if this one actually showed up in Standard decks. Grasping Current gives us a way to tutor up our Jace for 5 mana, bounce a couple creatures. Jace's Sentinel, on the other hand, there could be an argument. This actually works really well with Jace Cunning Castaway. 2 mana, you get a 1/3, but if you have a Jace, it becomes a 2/3 that can't be blocked. So there could actually be some weird merfolky deck in Standard that's playing Little Jace and wants to use Jason Sentinel as a pretty strong 2-drop actually, and then of course Woodland Stream. So those are our new Planeswalker deck cards. We also got the promos: Burning Sun's Avatar, Walk the Plank, Bishop of Rebirth, Unclaimed Territory. We've already talked about all these cards, or we'll talk about them as we go on today, so we'll go over them really quickly. Burning Sun Avatar, pretty expensive, powerful ability. We're going to talk about it a bunch later today, so we'll have to wait and discuss it there. Walk the Plank is not as good as it looks. It's a fine removal spell. Sorcery speed hurts it, and the ability to not kill Hazoret makes it a lot worse than Grasp of Darkness, which it will be replacing, but it's still a pretty cheap way to deal with a lot of things, even despite those drawbacks. Bishop of Rebirth, we've talked about this one. It's just a really bad Sun Titan, and I don't think the ability or the body is big enough to make it see play in Standard. And then Unclaimed Territory is a really exciting tribal land, great for slivers, great for merfolk, basically any tribe. If you're heavily tribal, this is a great land because it's like an ancient Ziggurat where it's going to fix your mana really well if you're tribal, but you can tap it to add colorless mana to play your spells as well, which is a huge upgrade over some of the similar cards we've seen like this in the past. So I expect if you're playing like 3, 4, 5 color tribal decks, this is kind of just an auto include. It's like a budget Cavern of Souls, doesn't help you beat counterspell decks, but it's still great for fixing your mana if you're playing like a 5-color tribal creature-y deck like Slivers or Humans or something along those lines. So those are our promos and our Planeswalker decks cards, which means we better move on. As far as the red cards, first up we have Tillinali's Skin Shifter, which is a super unique card, but I don't know how effective it's going to be. So 3 mana, you get a 0/1. Off to a good start. It does have haste, which is nice, and whenever it attacks, it becomes a copy of another target attacking non-legendary creature until end of turn. So the problem with this card is it's super safe. Like, everything about this avoids doing anything even potentially a little bit broken. So before we talk about what the card can do, let's talk about what Skin Sifter can't do. So what it can't do is, of course, it can't have enter the battlefield abilities because it enters the battlefield as itself, a 0/1, blah, blah, blah. It can't get attack triggers like Primeval Titan. You can't copy a Primeval Titan and search out 2 lands because by the time Tillinolly's Skin Shifter becomes a copy of Primeval Titan, that trigger would already have been declared. So you miss out on that, which also means you miss out on Exerting, which was potentially one of the more powerful things to do in Standard. Be able to like have a Glorybringer out, play a Skin Shifter to copy Glorybringer, double Exert, go crazy like that. So you miss out on anything even a little bit broken, which means what you can do with Skin Shifter is play a Blood Rage Brawler on turn 2, play a Skin Shifter on turn 3, copy a Blood Rage Brawler, attack for 8. Same thing with like Tarmogoyf in Modern if you're going to try this in Modern for some reason. So that's basically all I've found that you can do with it, is hope that you play a big creature and can copy that big creature because you don't get any of the triggers, attacking, enter the battlefield, anything like that. The problem with this plan is, let's say you're on the Blood Rage Brawler plan. You're playing a mono red beatdown deck. You're like, this is going to be sweet. I'm in a Blood Rage Brawler. I'm going to copy it with Skin Sifter. I'm going to deal a ton of damage. How much better is that, even in the best case scenario, than just playing an On-Crop Crasher? I guess it might be very slightly better because you're getting a 4/3 instead of a 3/2, but think of it on the other end. What happens if your opponent just wrathed your board, or you don't draw your Blood Rage Brawler? You just play a 0/1, and you would much, much rather have On-Crop Crasher. So whatever slight benefit there is in the best case scenario is very much outweighed by the worst case scenario. So my hope for Tillinolly's Skin Shifter is that there's a combo out there that I haven't found yet. There's some crazy combo, some way to go infinite. I don't know what it would be since, like I said, it's really safe. It's worded in a way that avoids all triggers, which makes it really challenging to do anything too broken with it, but I'm hoping there's something I haven't found yet. So if you have any ideas on how to make Skin Sifter anything more than just copying a Blood Rage Brawler, make sure to let me know in the comments, because I think it's a really unique design, and I'd be interested in figuring out a way to make it work. Next on our list, we have Captain Lannery Storm, another one of the pirates, our red pirate legend, and this one is kind of an interesting hasty 3-drop. So it comes down with haste, 2/2 for 3. When it attacks, you get a treasure token, basically a Lotus Petal, and then whenever you sack a treasure, it gets +1/+0 till end of turn. So what can you do with Captain Lannery Storm? Well, basically you make Lotus Petals. The challenge with Captain Lannery Storm is how many Lotus Petals can you really make? It's only a 2/2, which means it's going to get blocked a lot. So I imagine the number of Lotus Petals you actually get to make, or treasures, I'm calling treasures Lotus Petals, they're very exactly similar, but the number of them you get to make is probably like 1 on a lot of board states. Maybe if things get out of control on an empty board, you can really go to town. Lotus Petals are good. You'll always make use of the extra mana. The question is, where can you really make Captain Lannery Storm fit in Standard? My first idea was maybe some sort of improvised deck with Inspiring Statuary, take advantage of the treasure token that way. But I think that PNLR is just a straight up better version of Captain Lannery Storm. Like, they're very similar, 2/2s for 3. The big difference is PNLR makes the token when she enters the battlefield, and it's a creature, which I think is mostly better, at least a lot of the time, than having a treasure token. So I don't think you'd actually use Captain Lannery Storm in an improvised deck. I think you would just go with PNLR. However, there might be a chance that you can play a really cool, like, red-black artifact deck using Yahani's Undying Partisan, Syndicate Trafficker. I like the idea of playing a Syndicate Trafficker, playing a hasty Captain Lannery Storm, getting in, getting the artifact token, sacking the artifact token, pumping up your Syndicate Trafficker, and kind of going to town that way. So maybe there's something there, but that's the best I could come up with. Just as a standalone card, the stats just aren't that good, and the ability just isn't that powerful. So I don't know unless you can find a way to really abuse the treasure token and take advantage of that synergy, I have a hard time imagining that this is going to be good enough for just like pirates or mono red aggro. There's so many options out there that I don't think this, especially being legendary, can match up to the rest of them. Although maybe there's a treasure token deck. If there's a way you can make a ton of treasures, sack a ton of treasures, I don't know, fling Captain Lannery Storm at your opponent, or just make it huge in combat, maybe that could work. So we'll see what support we get for treasures as the set is revealed. But at this point, I'm kind of on the fringe about Captain Lannery Storm in Standard. Next up, we have Sunbird's Invocation, which is a really interesting way to generate card advantage in red. So it's really expensive, 6 mana enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell from your hand, you look at the top X cards of your library, or reveal them actually, where X is a spell's converted mana cost. So you cast, let's say, another Sunbird's Invocation. You look at the top 6 cards, and you can cast a card for free with converted mana cost of X or less. So you can look at 6 cards and cast something 6 converted mana cost or less for free. So this is potentially pretty powerful in a format like Commander. It reminds me a little bit of Ripple. Obviously different than Ripple, but kind of similar. Also like a weird Cascade that you have more control over, because Cascade is just random. You're going to go until you hit a random card. The difference is Cascade always hits something if there's something in your deck. It's definitely possible to whiff on Sunbird's Invocation. You cast a 3-drop, look at 3 cards, you don't have anything converted mana cost 3 or less, you just get no value for it. So I think you really need to be playing big things, and I think that's where Sunbird's Invocation can really shine, especially in a format like Commander. As far as Standard, the best case scenario is something like Sunbird's Invocation, play a Verdurous Gearhulk, get a Chandra for free, which is really powerful, but you already have to have this Sunbird's Invocation on the battlefield first, which makes your curve really weird. So I don't know. To me, this is mostly a Commander card, a card that will probably be really fun and awesome in Commander. Like, not only card advantage, but casting things for free. You can cast big things. Maybe improvising things out could be a cool thing to do, or other ways to cheat on mana cost, so you get to cast bigger things even though you're not paying a really big amount of mana. But I think this is mostly a sweet Commander card with a lot of potential there, but probably a bit too expensive for Standard. Speaking of possibly a bit too expensive for Standard, we have Burning Sun's Avatar, another one of our dinosaurs. 6 mana, 6/6, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to deal 3 damage to opponent and 3 damage to up to 1 target creature. So this is the next in a long line of bad Titans. We've seen this being kind of a theme, I think, of Ixalan. Cards that are very similar to the Titan cycle, but not actually the Titan cycle. So Inferno Titan is the one this reminds me of. The good news about Burning Sun's Avatar is it's actually big. It is a 6/6 for 6, on par with Inferno Titan. When we talked about some of the other cards, like Bishop and Sun Titan, Bishop is just so small, but you actually have a good body with Burning Sun's Avatar, and the ability is pretty powerful. It's nice that it triggers when it enters the battlefield. You do lose the attack ability, which is fine, but this is a fairly powerful option as a finisher. Whether or not it sees play, I don't know. 6 mana is still a very big cost. At that point, you have stuff like Noxious Gearhulk that can come down and just straight up kill a creature and gain life. Would Burning Sun's Avatar beat out a card like Noxious Gearhulk? I don't really know, but the ability is basically a Searing Blaze on a really big body, and Searing Blaze is a really powerful card. When you can play this, get some damage at your opponent, shoot down one of their best creatures, and have a 6/6 body left behind, I think it's in the conversation for being playable. We'll have to see where it ends up. Obviously, it's even better if you have Dinosaur synergies or something that kind of makes it better thanks to the creature type, but I think it's close to being good enough as just a really big, powerful late-game finisher that throws some damage to the face and also takes care of an opposing threat. Finally, we have Angrath's Marauders, which is very expensive. 7 mana for a 4/4. The good news is it comes with essentially a Furnace of Wrath, or a personal Furnace of Wrath attached. So if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent player, it doubles it up, which is a really powerful effect. Doubling all your damage can do some crazy things. I mean, Shock is suddenly 4 damage. You attack with a random 4-power creature, you're dealing 8 damage. So once you get this on the battlefield, it's going to be really easy to close out the game. The problem is, when you think about Pirates, which seems like the most natural home for Angrath's Marauder, they're a pretty aggressive tribe. You want to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, and kind of go to town that way. Marauder is just way too expensive for that type of deck. Maybe there's some sweet combo out there where you can like ramp into it and throw some big burn spells at your opponent's face, double up, win that way. The other concern is the body is just really small. For 7 mana, you want a little bit more than a 4/4. It's not going to do very much in combat, not going to be able to attack very well. Although remember, it does essentially have double strike, since it will double the damage that it deals as well. So it's kind of attacking as an 8/4 essentially, which makes it sound a little bit better, but still, 4 power and toughness just is not a lot. So I think you got to be some sort of kind of combo / reanimator type deck to really take advantage of it. I don't think you can just play this as a fair card, like, oh, I'm going to play a bunch of stuff, I'm going to curve out, I'm going to play Marauders, hopefully kill my opponent. I think you got to have a specific purpose where you're looking to kind of combo off and win thanks to the damage doubling. So anyway, those are the red cards from the big spoiler dump on Monday. So let's move on, get to our last color, and talk about the green cards, and then we'll be all caught up from the big spoiler dump heading into next week, where spoilers should be coming hot and heavy. Let's jump right into it with a new dinosaur, and one that I really love. This is Ripjaw Raptor. 4 mana, you get a 4/5, has Enrage, so whenever it's dealt damage, you used to draw a card. This card is super good. It's good in a very spiky, competitive sense. Probably the best dinosaur that has been printed so far. So the stats are good. A 4/5 for 4 mana is already a good deal, and the Enrage ability means unless your opponent has a hard removal spell, like a black removal spell, a white removal spell like Cast Out, you're going to get value from your Ripjaw Raptor, even if your opponent kills it. If they attack into it, you block with it, you draw a card, maybe you draw multiple cards with it. If you attack your opponent and they chump, you draw a card. There's so many things that this can do. It's a great source of card advantage. It makes it really hard. Put your opponent in these tough positions where they got to choose, like, is it really worth it to give our opponent a card to not take this 4 damage, and it puts them in a really tough position. So the other thing about Ripjaw Raptor is the stats we already know are good. I mean, a 4 mana 4/5, it's a Siege Rhino, it's a Reaper of the Wilds. Both of those cards were standard playable and actually really good, and I'm not saying that Ripjaw Raptor is Siege Rhino, going to be the best card in standard or anything, but this is pretty pushed, and it's going to be super powerful, super hard to deal with. I expect it to be a staple in standard at some point during its life. The one problem with Ripjaw Raptor is Bristles. Bristling Hydra is the king or queen or whatever of green 4-drops at the moment, and I'm not sure if that changes or not because of Ripjaw Raptor. So, of course, if you are an energy deck, and energy is still going to be very popular in Ixalan standard, it doesn't lose basically anything. The upside, I guess, of being an insanely parasitic mechanic, but if you're an energy deck, you're still going to want Bristling Hydra. It's just so insane in those decks. The bigger question is, if you're not an energy deck, you're green-red monsters, let's say, Jund mid-range, those type of decks have been playing Bristling Hydra as well, even though they don't produce much energy. It's just a one-shot, give it hexproof one time. In those decks, that's where I think Riptide Raptor might be able to replace Bristling Hydra, because the ability to draw cards is very, very powerful, maybe even more powerful than a one-shot hexproof. The thing we'll have to look at is how the removal lines up. If you think about Bristling Hydra versus Ripjaw Raptor in a non-energy deck, Bristling Hydra can fizzle 1 removal spell. Ripjaw Raptor kind of fizzles 1 removal spell by drawing you a card. The difference is Bristling Hydra is a 5/4 essentially if you activate it once. Ripjaw Raptor is a 4/5. So if those stats matter, if there's some reason that a 5/4 is better than a 4/5 or vice versa, that's going to push the cards in one way or another. So we'll have to see how it shakes out, but I'm pretty sure that Ripjaw Raptor is very good. One last thing about the Raptor. Awesome combo with Walking Ballista. Ballista combos with Enrage in general, but it's especially sweet with Ripjaw Raptor. So let's say you're playing some sort of Jund mid-range, green-red monster deck. You're desperate to find an answer. You have a Ripjaw Raptor out. You can play your Walking Ballista and ping your Ripjaw Raptor up to 4 times without killing your Raptor. Draw 4 cards, which is a pretty awesome deal from your Walking Ballista. If you're looking for a mana sink in the late game, you can pay 4, put a counter on it, remove the counter, ping your Raptor. Pay 4, draw a card isn't great, but if you're flooded out and just looking for answers, it's going to be worth it a lot of the time. So I expect to see these cards played together fairly often because the ability to ping your own Ripjaw Raptor is very, very strong. Next on our list, we have Deeproot Champion, which is weird because of its colors. It basically has Prowess, 2-mana 1/1 with Prowess, except the Prowess sticks around in the form of +1/+1 counters, which makes it way more powerful than Prowess. The weird thing is it's green. Normally with these type of cards, I think red, I think blue, something in that range. So it's interesting to see it in green. However, there is precedent because it's very similar to Curion Dryad. So Curion Dryad is almost exactly the same card, except it triggers when any non-green spell is cast. Creature spell, non-creature spell. And Curion Dryad was at one point a key piece of a real competitive top-of-the-format deck in Miracle Grow. So there is precedent here for a card very similar to Deeproot Champion being very, very strong. So we'll have to see. Of course, in Modern, you can play them both together, which is kind of sweet. You cast your Lightning Bolts, cast your Zerm Visions, growing your 2-drops in tandem. In Standard, I could see this being some sort of like Teamer spell prowessy type decks. You got to Tune with Ethers, you got to Braids, you got Negates, ton of cheap spells to keep growing the Deeproot Champion. And probably the spicier option, though, is, remember, Deeproot Champion just says non-creature spell. It doesn't say instant or sorcery spell, which means it triggers off artifacts, so you can play it in some sort of crazy Ravenous Intruder implement deck. The Ravenous Intruder gets big by sacking the artifacts, the Deeproot Champion gets big by playing the artifacts. Kind of works really well together in a super sweet way. Throw in a fling and you got a stew. Next on our list, we have Walker of the Wilds, and this card, I don't know. 4 mana, you get a 3/3, and you have the ability to pay 2 green and X, put X counters on a land, it becomes an elemental creature with haste, blah, 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 blah. Wizards is continuing with their trend of reprinting mechanics. It's Awaken, but not keywording it. It is exactly Awaken. So is Walker of the Wilds good? And I think the answer is probably no. The problem is, if you awaken your land, it dies to Fatal Push, so it's super risky, and it's also super expensive. If you think about it, you gotta pay 3 mana to make a 1/1. I guess in the late game, it's potentially powerful. You pay a bunch of mana, make your land huge, but it still dies to Fatal Push and all the common removal, so I think it's just too slow, and it's too risky, because once you start getting your lands killed by Fatal Push, things usually spiral out of control in a bad way very quickly. Next on our list, we have Shaper's Sanctuary, which is about as efficient as it gets. You always got to take notice when you see an effect that's only 1 mana, and the effect is fairly strong. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability your opponent controls, you get to draw a card. So this is basically sort of close to a reprint of a really old card, Reparations, owner of maybe the greatest flavor text of all time. Sorry I burned down your village. Here's some gold. But it plays very similar to Reparations. Your opponent targets your stuff, you get to draw a card for it. So is this going to be standard playable? That's the big question. And I don't know. So the good news is getting value when your opponent targets your creatures with Fatal Pushes, Abrades, Magma Sprays, that's pretty nice. On the other, so you could play it in some sort of mono-green aggro deck, green pelt Rampagers, Ronus's Last Stands, go beat down, a way to protect your creatures. The thing is, this isn't the type of effect you really want to play in the main deck because it only is good in certain matchups. Like, if you can draw 2, 3, 4 cards off of this, it's a very strong effect, but if you run into certain decks, you're not going to do anything for your mana. So in Standard, I picture this being mostly a sideboard card. Play it in your sideboard when you run into that Jund mid-range deck or a control deck with tons of targeted removal. It's a way for your aggro deck to keep up. Play it on turn 1, every creature your opponent kills with a Magma Spray, a Fatal Push, every non-wrath source, basically, you are going to be able to draw a card from it, which is a great way for an aggro deck to stay in the game against a control or a removal heavy mid-range deck. Also seems very strong in Commander, but I don't think in Standard that you will start with this in your main deck. I have a hard time imagining it just because, kind of like Trespasser's Curse, it has great matchups and has horrible matchups, and it's just too risky to play those high variance cards in your main deck. Next up, we have, guess what? Another green 4-drop, Emperor's Vanguard. In this one, I want to like this card. I really love the Explore mechanic, kind of like Scrying, card advantage generating, growing your creature, but A 4-mana 4/3 is just not a great body to begin with. It doesn't really do anything when it enters the battlefield. It gets chumped. When you compare it to something like Ripjaw Raptor, which is very much direct competition. I mean, Emperor's Vanguard doesn't have a relevant creature type, anything like that. It's hard for me to imagine that any deck in the history of Magic would ever be like, okay, I can play Ripjaw Raptor, I can play Emperor's Vanguard. I think Emperor's Vanguard is the right choice here. So that's the problem with Emperor's Vanguard. It's not that it's a horrible card. It's a fun card. It's got good art, but it just doesn't match up with all the other powerful 4-drops. You got Bristling Hydra, you got Ripjaw Raptor, you even have Waker of the Wilds of all things, which might even be better than Emperor's Vanguard. So it's pretty far down the green 4-drop list, and without a relevant creature type heading into a tribal standard, it seems unlikely that this really shows up anywhere. Last on our list, we got Verdant Sun's Avatar, which is a super sweet dinosaur. So 7 mana, you get a 5/5, but when it or another creature enters the battlefield, you get to gain life equal to its toughness. So it's an angelic chorus of 5 mana enchantment on a pretty big body. And at first I was like, okay, maybe this can be a way for dinosaurs to compete. The problem with dinosaurs that we see so far is they're just big and slow. So you're at risk of getting run over by aggro. Let's say you get down at a pretty low life total, you finally stick your Verdant Sun Avatar, you gain a bunch of life when it enters the battlefield, gain more life each dinosaur, climb your life total back up, you have these huge dinosaurs. And I think the problem is it's just too slow. Like, at 7 mana, it's just too much for that plan to work. If this was a 5 mana 4/4 or something, I would be a lot more excited about it. But 7 mana, if you think about the big decks in Standard, Ramanant Bread, various energy decks, Green-Black Constrictor decks, Rogue Refiner decks, pretty much all of those decks will have you at 0 by the time you get your 7 mana Verdant Sun's Avatar out and start gaining life. The one exception I could see is some sort of ramp deck. So if you're ramping and can get down Verdant Sun's Avatar on like turn 5, it can be a pretty good stabilization card, because the 5 life you gain right away, along with a 5/5 body, should be enough to keep you alive. And then the next turn, you're going to keep playing more big things. It's not legendary. You can even play more Verdant Sun's Avatar. So once it gets going, you can gain an absurd amount of life. So we'll have to see. Maybe Dinosaur Ramp will be a thing. If Dinosaur Ramp is a thing, Verdant Sun's Avatar will very likely at least be a sideboard card to help fight against aggro decks to stabilize the board. And at best, it could just be like a staple, because the amount of life Verdant Sun's Avatar can gain you is absolutely off the charts. The challenge is casting and living long enough to play your 7 mana card to stabilize. So we'll have to see. Anyway, that's all of our Ixalan spoilers for today. So what do you think? What's the best green 4-drop? There's approximately 1 million of them in the set, apparently, and we haven't even seen most of it yet. How good is Ripjaw Raptor? Can we wombo combo with Walking Ballista? Can Deeproot Champion make some crazy green prowess deck? What do you think about Shaper's Sanctuary? Is that something you'll play in the main deck, despite the risk of it being a dead card in some matchups? Am I missing anything about Emperor's Vanguard that makes it better than it looks on paper? What about Verdant Sun's Avatar? Is it fast enough to be relevant to Standard? Let me know in the comments. Again, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.